Woke up early in the morning, grabbed my coffee, now I'm roaring, ready to face the day and getting shit done in business.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Getting Shit Done in Business podcast. We have our guest, Dwight McLeod from Capstone Strategy Group, returning. If you were listening to our last episode, he talked a lot about processes in business, process improvement, and streamlining that. And if you missed that episode, I highly recommend checking it out. We'll make sure that we link it in this one. So welcome back, Dwight. I am so excited to dive into this episode and talk a lot more about change in business and technology.
Thank you, Celine. Good to be back.
Awesome. So when we started chatting before we were recording, we were talking about how change is constant in businesses, and that scares a lot of people, but it's a universal truth. So talk to me a little bit about change, what type of change businesses experience, and why it's especially relevant in 2024.
Businesses always experience change, and if you don't believe it, just do a snapshot of every 10 years and look at what the top 10 businesses are 10 years, 10 years, 10 years, 10 years, right? You don't hear much about Xerox anymore. It just isn't as a thing anymore. You didn't hear about Salesforce at all 10 years ago because it wasn't. So change forces things to happen, and you have to kind of embrace it. You can't be afraid of it because it is going to make things different where you are, and that's okay. Different is not bad. Different is just different.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, there's probably lots of types of change in the world, but there's kind of two, I think, ways things change. One is that like sudden impact, something happens and you're forced to change, like a major pivot in your industry. Obviously, COVID was a big change for businesses. Maybe you lose a key person. Maybe very suddenly something like public perception of something changes. So there's like that kind of sudden change. And then there's also gradual change where you don't really notice a change happening because it's very slow, but all of a sudden you kind of look around and you're like, this isn't where I was a year ago or 3 years ago. Things are different. So I know sudden change is easy to identify. How do you kind of, in a business, identify or track that slower change, and how do you know when and how to adapt to it?
So we encourage all of our clients to have 5 key performance indicators at the top. Things that when a CEO comes in or a CFO comes in, they can look at those 5 measurements and see how effective their business is behaving. Those 5 measurements are then linked to measurements as they move down through the organization. And they all feed up into those 5. So that at any given time, a snapshot can tell you, do you have more sales coming in? Do you have fewer sales coming in? Are you booking the same level of revenue? Are you booking less revenue? Do you have your more people on the bench, or are they all out doing billable work? So those are things that every leader should know. And as it goes down the line, if those things change, they should be able to key into it and go to the folks that are responsible for it and say, okay, why do we have more people on the bench? What's happening? Well, we don't have as many sales coming in, so we don't have projects for them to go on, but we can't get rid of them because if a project comes, we won't be able to handle it. So you've got to have that balance, and that's what your key performance indicators tell you. If you don't measure it, it won't get done.
100%. And I mean, this is probably a loaded question because it really depends on so many factors, but how should a business, so let's say, they took your advice, they're tracking these, top 5 KPIs, and they start to notice a change. Maybe sales are going down, maybe something else is changing. And a lot of businesses, when I talk to them, they're stuck. They're like, okay, we know this isn't, but we don't know why, and we don't know what to do with it. Like if you think about levels of awareness, there may be symptom aware, possibly problem aware. So how do you nurture businesses through that kind of like awareness and strategy level to go from, hey, these are the numbers, they've changed, we don't know why, to like, what's the action that comes out of it?
One of my good friends and business partners is fond of saying, projects don't go off a day at a time. They go off a second at a time. And so every day you should be doing something to understand how your business is progressing or not progressing that day, because now is your time to fix it and get on top of it. Maybe, we talk, everybody's talking AI now. So everybody you go to wants AI. And we look at them and say, so tell us about your underlying base technology. What is it? Right? Tell us about your data sets. How clean are they? Do you have duplicates in your data sets that would make it impossible for you to identify one specific thing? And if the answer is yes, then let's start with cleaning up the data and getting that correct, because that is what AI is going to utilize to give you the information you're seeking. So you maybe don't need AI as much as you need looking at the internal process and data collection and how that's done. I mean, a computer doesn't know, you identified me as Dwight McLeod. My first name is William. So I'm in some places as William McLeod. I'm in some places as William D. McLeod. I'm in some places as W. Dwight McLeod. The computer doesn't know and doesn't care. Those are 6 or 7 instances. So until we can clean that up and understand how things are operating, it's going to be really impossible to understand where that erosion is taking place.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, the name is a really good example. We work with a lot of industries, but in particular, when we work with law firms, something that law firms have to do to be compliant is a conflict check, where they have to make sure you have no conflict of interest with anyone. Well, when names are in the system, as different names, maybe nicknames, maybe like married versus maiden names, or sometimes if you're talking about potentially in criminal law, people intentionally hide or change their name.
Exactly.
And so it's like, what are other ways that you can identify people, maybe by like email address or phone number or home address or date of birth. But like you said, you still have to have that data. And I'm just curious, because I know you work with AI. What type of AI in business do you typically work with? Just out of curiosity.
We tend to work more with automation, because we don't believe companies are ready for AI yet. They think they are. What they're ready for is Chat GTP, where I'm sitting on the phone and I'm looking at something and I want to know what. As an example, we're starting to do some work with NYCHA, and we wanted to know what NYCHA's plans for 2024 and 2025 were. Go to Chat GTP, you ask them that, it will go out and grab that information for you because it's public access information. But now when you start talking about how to run your business with AI, if you don't have that level of information somewhere where it is reliable, you're not ready for that. So there's some steps that you can take. We show people the graph that starts at the bottom, 0, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, to where you become a center of excellence. Each one of those steps has specific accomplishable activity that needs to be done. And none of it's getting rid of people.
Yeah.
It's repurposing those people to do things. I listened to Fareed Zakaria last week describe what AI is going to do for the medical profession. And he said, you take a doctor, and a doctor that works with women doing mammograms, right? Something all women do all the time. And depending on who you are and your body makeup, you get different false signals sometimes. My wife gets a signal that says she has dense breast material. And in the beginning, before a doctor knew, he would call her back for something that basically said, you have a problem. We have to discuss this, and so on and so forth. But now that he's been with her for 10 years, he understands what this is. Well, if you take AI and you give it your test and it flashes that up against 2 million other tests that have been run, you can look at the similarities. What is the doctor seeing? 300, 400 of them maybe? So what is the level of accuracy that's going to come out of looking at 2 million? Quite interesting, right? What does the doctor become? Well, he's no longer a diagnostic person. What the doctor becomes is a life coach that says to you, Celine, here's some things that we spotted. People that have had this have lived longer when they've done these things. So let me help you understand some changes you might need to make. For high blood pressure, for high cholesterol, for this, for that. Here's some changes that we know you can make that'll help you live longer and a more effective life. So that's what the doctor's going to become. Now think about all the doctors that are 60 or 70. They're leaving before that happens. Trust me.
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with that. But that's what's going to happen with some of this technology that's coming. It's going to make you rethink the way you do things.
100%. And I always say like more data. I mean, obviously it has to be accurate data. And so that's a really interesting, I think, application of AI where they would have good data sets and they would have, reliable information. I've also noticed the way a lot of people use ChatGPT is it's skimming the web. You don't know if its information is reliable or not. It also can't critically think about the information it's giving you. A good example, actually, recently I recorded a rant on this that I posted as a reel. Is people are using it for job applications. When I was hiring, I started realizing very quickly, because I can spot it, all these job applications, out of hundreds of applications, many of them were written with ChatGPT. And I don't mean like they had good prompts that were customized and then they changed it a bit. I mean, I had 50 applications that were almost word for word identical, because what people were doing was they were copying and pasting the job post and saying, like, write me an intro for this job post, and hitting enter. And turns out when dozens of people submit the exact same prompts into ChatGPT, it just gives the same answers to everybody. And so, I mean, at a solo level, like somebody might not spot that. They might be like, oh, this seems well written. But then for me, I see, 50 phrases that say communicating technical terms to non-technical stakeholders. That's not a phrase that 50 people would just organically come up with themselves. But all these applications, they were so generic. They told me nothing about the person themselves because none of the inputs were customized to the individual. And so I think it's great that these types of tools exist that are like widely accessible for people. But I also think that there is a huge gap in how they are used. I'm sure you've seen like viral things of like teachers posting AI essays that they received with hilarious results, and like so many, I guess, AI gone wrong. And so it probably comes down to what you say is people are not even ready for. You said people are ready for ChatGPT. Maybe some people are not even ready for ChatGPT yet.
I think they are. They just don't know how to use it, right?
Yeah.
We're going to go away on vacation, and we're going to an area that we don't know. So you go to ChatGPT and says, okay, lay out an itinerary for 7 days in Tuscany. And it can do that because there's a lot of information about that. Even if you just go to Frommer's and want to read their book, it's that kind of stuff. So you can do that with ChatGPT and say, I like to have some downtime in the middle of the day. So it'll skip around 12 to 3 or 12 to 4 and give you that kind of itinerary. That's smart. You can do that. But what you should be doing with something like that is taking it now, because you said something very interesting. Software doesn't think. Software just does, right? So the cognitive capability that we need to put into that resume, that CV, or whatever, has to come from us. Can we use ChatGPT to say, show me a resume of somebody who does this job? Sure. But then you take that and you don't just cut and paste. That's lazy. I don't want that person working for me anyhow. But you take that information and say, okay, I've done this, but I did it here in this context. And you reshape it, right? So it's real and it's about you. That's what we need to get people to do. And that's what we try to do. That's the message we try to share with senior leaders. You want your people doing things that improve the lives of your customer, not just rotely giving them a nonsense answer. So, let's talk about how we do that.
Yeah. So how do you then go into a business and implement, whether it be automations or whether it be a chat GPT? Because I feel like automations and GPT are kind of the opposite. Automations, you need to be ultra specific because
Yep.
you want that output to be exactly repeatable. You don't want the computer to think. You don't want the computer to freestyle. You want the computer to do the exact automation you want it to do. Versus, GPT is where you're like trying to take its output and make it more creative, and you are hoping the computer kind of thinks and comes up with ideas for you. So how do you? Yeah.
We do more of the automation now because that's where most people are. They've got invoices, they've got bills of lading, they've got all these things that we can now read structured and unstructured data with software so that we can put it in a format that makes sense to them and we can show them stuff. And we tell them none of this is to just be taken for granted and passed along. You have to put eyes on it and make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. Someone has to look at this that has that capability. Yes, I'm going to give them 80% of their work done, but that last 20% is what you're paying them for. So that's what we want you to do. It's not always a well-received message because they want it to be automatic and go like that so they can get rid of people and send more money to the bottom line. But that's just not how business works.
Yeah, that's true. And then I guess one other question I have for you, because you're talking about kind of, automations in business and taking away that 80% grunt work. What are I'm not going to give it a specific number like top 3, top 5, top 10, but what would you say are the top, like, most valuable or important things that businesses can and should automate that they don't?
Wow. See, businesses are so very different. We're working with a client now that has 15,700 users. And every year they have to perform a task. And they've been doing it manually forever. So we came in and introduced them to a process of how to get it done in an automated fashion and reduced it from a 9-month job to 6 weeks, right? Saving them $300,000-$400,000 a year in the process. That's different than somebody who is making widgets that go out and they've got logistics routes and they've got all these other things. That can still be automated, but someone has to look at it to make sure it's going to the right place.
Yeah.
Someone has to look at the order that came in that asked for 200 and that we didn't make a mistake and send 2,000, right? That's the kind of things that you want the system to pick up on and help you see, because a bot is only going to put what's there. It's not going to fat finger. It's not going to switch numbers around or anything like that. It's going to give you exactly what's there. So that's the beauty of it. Now what you need is someone to look at that and say, okay, so-and-so's trending upward. Let me make a sales call there and see what I can do. That's how you use that information. And that's how we try to get them to think.
Yeah, that's so true. And really quickly before we wrap up, because I know you have to go soon. Before we started our call today, you mentioned that one thing that you kind of want to bring to our audience that you can offer is a low-cost proof of concept. So tell me a little bit more about that and what that looks like.
We offer to come into your business and at a very low cost, demonstrate for you what an automation would do for one thing. Obviously, we're not going to take a huge, complicated process to do it, but let's just take one simple thing, checking on something. And we'll do that proof of concept for you. Probably see if we can get the software purchased for you or something, and then you just pay for the work that we do. And it's not going to be a lot of money, but it's going to help you get to a point where you can make a decision.
Yeah.
And that's really what you need to see. I'm not going to go blind into this. If I can see it working on my data so I can look at it and say, that makes sense, then it's something that I can make a decision.
Yeah, well, that's amazing because a lot of people have a hard time like visualizing how different automations can work. I mean,
Exactly.
some very simple where people can be like, okay, I know if someone signs a contract, it can automatically generate and send the invoice, or like those sorts of really simple automations people can visualize. But when they're more nuanced or complicated, especially businesses who aren't super tech savvy, they just kind of get glassy eyed. Like they need to see it and have that kind of like interactive experience to really understand how it's going to work and benefit their business. So that's really cool that you offer that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm going to put all of your business name and your links and contact information in the episode anyway in the show notes. But if somebody wants to reach out reach out to you for a consultation to get kind of that proof of concept, how would they do that?
They can call, or they can email me, or they can look us up on LinkedIn and come in that way.
Awesome. So I'll make sure to include all that for you.
Perfect. 914-667-4659 is the office number, and it will always be answered.
Awesome. I'm going to try it at 2 a.m. just to see. I'm just kidding.
There you go.
Well, it
will be answered, just not by me at that point in time.
Fair enough. Any kind of like last comments or things you wanted to add, or maybe something that you kind of wanted to tell everyone today that I just didn't ask the right question?
I think we're living in a very exciting time. Things are happening so fast that, yes, it can be overwhelming, but if you just step back and take a deep breath, you know what you do very well. How do we apply that to where we're going? Because it's always going to be necessary. So
true. I personally, sometimes I hate change. Like when Google, they changed the little icon of the person that you dropped to the Google Street View, and I don't know why that small change made me so angry. But I like it because it helped me empathize with my clients who hate change. But in general, I love change, and I get excited when new software options come out. I feel like change just gives you more options in life. It gives you more ways of doing things. So I'm definitely pro change, but I know it can also be a hassle. Like when you figure out the perfect process or you figure out the perfect system, and then the world changes around it, and suddenly your perfect system is obsolete. It can be frustrating too.
One of my favorite economists, C.J. Jung, used to say, "If there is no change, there is no truth." And so, if you just think about that for a moment, the more we learn, the more things change, right? So, if there is no change, there is no truth, and that's just the bottom line.
That's true. And I think that's a great kind of thought, quote, message to end on. So I'm going to thank you so much, Dwight, for being on for not one, but 2 episodes, which is even better. And it was wonderful meeting you. And hopefully, we'll have you on to talk in the future, too, because I feel like you have a lot of insight to share in the business world for sure.
Well, thank you, Celine. You made this so easy. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Teamwork hard, let's make progress. Getting shit done in business.